Have you ever wondered what truly causes a narcissist to collapse not on the outside but from deep within their mind? It's not the screaming, not the tearful goodbye. It's something far colder: silence. An indifference that needs no justification, no argument. In today's video, we're going to step into a place few dare to explore: the chaotic inner world of a narcissist when they realize you're no longer there. Not physically, but emotionally. You've withdrawn from the game they used to direct. No dramatic exits, no declarations. Just one thing: peace. And that very peace is what brings them to their knees. We do not promote hatred or revenge. What we share are the psychological shadows drawn from real-life experiences, insights, and the healing journeys of countless people who have lived through manipulative and emotionally destructive relationships. All content adheres to fair use principles with the sole aim of education, awareness, and awakening the inner strength within each of us. If you've ever felt misunderstood, if you've ever been in a relationship that made you lose yourself, stay with us until the end of this video. Because this isn't just a story about them, it's a story about your rebirth. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any future journeys of awakening. Version 1. The silence that brings down the narcissist's empire. Not everyone who stays is weak, and not everyone who leaves is giving up. There's a kind of wound that doesn't bruise, a form of manipulation that needs no words. And there are relationships that drain you, not because the other person hits you, but because they quietly bleed you dry, little by little, with sweet words. Calculated silence and emotional storms you were never given an umbrella for. You stayed because you were strong. Yes, strong. You weren't blind, you were hopeful. You weren't submissive, you believed in change. You thought that if you loved deeply enough, sincerely enough, love would awaken something in them. That one day they'd finally see that you stayed, that you didn't walk away, even when it hurt. And that belief kept you going, kept you loving, kept you forgiving, until you had nothing left to give. But here's what few people will tell you. A narcissist doesn't come to be loved. They come to be reflected. They don't seek relationships to build together, but to see themselves through your eyes. They need to feel powerful, desirable, righteous, admirable. And you, with your sensitive heart and compassionate soul, became the perfect mirror. You reflected back the image they wanted to believe about themselves. But the irony is, the more you gave, the more they took you for granted. No gratitude, no reciprocation, just more taking. You once asked yourself, why can't they see how much I love them? The truth is, they do see it, but they don't feel it, and they certainly don't value it. Because to a narcissist, love isn't something to be cherished, it's something to be controlled. Then one day, something shifted in you. Not with an explosion, not with a dramatic, tearful goodbye, but with silence. You no longer needed to argue. You no longer waited for an apology. You stopped trying to explain. You simply felt nothing. And that is their worst nightmare. They don't fear your tears. They know how to manipulate those. They're not intimidated by your anger. They've seen it, even provoked it. But your indifference, the coldness in the eyes that once burned with love, that sends them into panic. Because when you no longer react, the game ends. And when the game ends, their power vanishes. In the narcissist's world, they exist through the reactions of others. Your anger is proof they still have influence. Your tears affirm their control. Every explanation, every attempt to fix things, it all feeds their empty ego. But when you stop playing, stop negotiating, stop hoping, they fall into a void. And for them, that void is hell. You don't need to leave in rage. You don't need to destroy them. You only need to stop wanting them. And that alone is enough to make their empire crumble. They will try to pull you back, not out of love, but out of fear. Fear of losing the mirror that once glorified them. They'll blame, play victim, even pretend to change anything to lure you back into their web. But this time, you're no longer there. You've chosen peace. You've chosen yourself. And that isn't selfish. That's right. Because in a healthy relationship, love doesn't require one person to endlessly sacrifice themselves just to maintain the indifference of the other. When you walk away in silence, they will feel the loss. But not of a loving partner of their power. They'll try to provoke emotion through any means: texts, guilt, nostalgic memories fabricated, excuses, blame, games. But you know what? None of that is an invitation for reconnection. It's bait hooks, designed to reel you back in emotionally. If you react even with anger or pity, they regain center stage. And the cycle begins again: idealize, devalue, discard. But if you hold your silence, keep your clarity, you dismantle their entire operating system. You've pulled the plug from the emotional circuit they once controlled. You didn't win by fighting. You won by walking away with wisdom. And that isn't surrender. That is awakening. Version 2. You don't have to scream to be strong. Awakening doesn't come with thunder. It arrives in a moment of silence. Not because you've been defeated, but because you've realized no one deserves to hear your heart so badly that you must scream to be heard. You once tried to explain, cried yourself empty just to be understood. You opened your heart, forgave, humbled yourself to the lowest point, all to preserve something you believed was love. But over time you began to see you were never truly being heard. You were simply being monitored to be controlled. In the narcissist's world, conversations aren't for connection. They're tools, a stage, a strategy. They don't listen to understand. They listen to counter, to collect weaknesses, to twist the very words you shared in complete sincerity. And at some point you stopped talking, not because you had nothing left to say, but because you no longer believed your words held any value in their eyes. That wasn't the silence of surrender. It was the silence of someone who has graduated from the delusion. You began to pull back. You no longer needed to prove you're right. No longer craved validation from someone who only offers it as a conditional bargain. The urge to be understood, the very thing that once kept you hanging on, began to fade. You stopped seeking warmth in the eyes of someone who only used emotion as a lever for control. You didn't give up on love, you gave up the illusion. And in that letting go, you didn't lose anything. You reclaimed yourself. Maybe you can't even pinpoint when it all began. Maybe it was after one more meaningless argument where you found yourself staring blankly instead of reacting. Or maybe it was one quiet morning waking up beside them feeling nothing. No hate, no love, no pain, just emptiness. And that emptiness was the beginning of your freedom. A narcissist cannot face the raw emotions of others because they've long abandoned their own. They've built an identity from bricks of illusion that they are always right, always the victim, always wounded. And they need others to validate that fantasy. They need you not as a whole independent person, but as a mirror that reflects the script they're performing. When you go silent, they lose the script. When you stop reacting, they lose control. When you find peace, not for them, but for yourself, the entire system of power they built over your mind collapses. And that's when they begin to unravel. Not always with screaming or slamming doors, though that happens too. Sometimes it's subtler panic, masked behind a false calm. They'll say the familiar lines that used to soften your heart. I just want us to be happy. You used to care so much more. You've changed. But this time you're not listening with a wounded heart. You're listening with clarity. Those words are empty now. Not because you've become cold, but because you've stopped using your softness as a bridge. You've learned that love doesn't mean sacrificing yourself for someone who never intended to change. You don't need to speak. Your silence says everything. It's not rejection, it's a declaration I've had enough. And that terrifies them more than any threat ever could. They can't fight someone who no longer wants to fight. They can't manipulate someone who no longer seeks approval. They can't hold on to you not because you walked away too fast, but because you've been emotionally gone for a long time. True love needs no scripts, no strategies. It doesn't play out on an emotional stage where one is always the star and the other a disposable supporting role. And when you awaken, you no longer take the role. You leave the theater altogether. Emotional maturity isn't about shouting, "I deserve love." It's about quietly walking away from where love never lived. Version 3. They're not afraid of losing you. They're afraid of losing control over you. The collapse of a narcissist doesn't begin with an explosion. It begins the moment you feel nothing at all. No dramatic goodbyes, no furious outbursts, no tear-stained scenes like in the movies. Just one thing, but enough to bring down the entire emotional empire they built. You withdrew quietly, irreversibly. They once read you like a book. They knew when you were vulnerable. They knew what to say to make you hesitate. They knew how to look at you with just the right amount of false remorse when every lie was exposed, and once again you forgave. Once again you stepped back into the same cycle: idealization, devaluation, promises, blame, reset. But now they do all of that, and you don't respond. You don't reply to their 5-paragraph messages. You don't like their cryptic social media posts. You don't accidentally show up at places you know they frequent. You're not angry, not jealous, not tired of explaining why you walked away. You are silent, and that silence drives them mad. They can't comprehend it. How could they? They've controlled your emotions for so long with sweet compliments laced with cold contempt. They could once shift your self-perception with a single glance or a well-timed phrase. They adjusted your mood like someone tweaking the temperature of a room. And now, you're like a soundless wall. And to a narcissist, that's not silence, it's war. Because to them, you were never an autonomous person. You were an energy source. Your emotions, whether love, anger, sadness, or hope, were the fuel that fed their hollow ego. They didn't need your genuine love, they just needed your reaction. So when you stopped reacting, it felt as if someone had pulled the plug on their survival machine. No signal, no feedback, no control. They begin to panic. Not the kind you've seen before, but a quiet kind, hidden beneath forced smiles, empty eyes, and hollow words they've said too many times. You might hear them say, "I just want us to go back to how things were. You used to care more. I know I messed up, but you've changed too." Once those words were traps, and you fell into them more than once. But this time, you're not who you used to be. You're no longer the one trying to understand why they hurt you, only to turn around and accept their apology. You now see it for what it is, not remorse, but resource depletion. When you withdraw emotionally, not just physically but mentally and spiritually, you commit an act for which they have no script. They know what to do when you cry. They have tactics for your anger, but they have no tools for your peace. When you no longer need to be understood, no longer need to be loved by them, but simply need peace, their entire system collapses. In that hidden desperation, they may try everything. Woo you with nostalgia. Guilt trip you by highlighting all they did for you. Spread rumors painting you as cold to others. Manipulate through mutual friends, family, or even new partners. None of it is meant to heal. None of it is real accountability. It all serves one purpose: to scramble your mind. They don't need you back out of love. They only need a response, even a glance, a single message, a moment of self-doubt. Was I too harsh? And they know they've made it in. A single crack in your clarity is enough for them to slither back in and relight the same old game. But this time, you're no longer their mirror. You no longer reflect to them who they want to believe they are: admirable, wounded, or worthy of being saved. You've stepped out of every role they assigned to you. And to someone who survives through performance, your absence becomes unbearable emptiness. You don't need to scream to prove anything. You just need to be silent with clarity. And that is the death knell for the illusion they once believed was eternal. Version 4. It's not your departure that broke them. It's your indifference. A narcissist isn't as strong as they pretend to be. And you didn't walk away from someone powerful, you walked away from a soul running from itself. During your time with them, you once admired their confidence, the way they walked into a room like the world owed them attention, the way they commanded everyone to pause and listen, the way they demanded loyalty, yet never truly gave anything in return. But then one day you started to sense something was off behind those eyes. Something false in their praise, in their promises, in those sudden storms of anger. You couldn't name it at the time, but you could feel it something unstable. The truth is, narcissists are not confident. They are not strong. They are not okay. They are people who survive by reflecting themselves through others. They have no stable sense of self, no inner foundation. They build their identity from your admiring gaze, from your reactions, from the love you give to reassure themselves that they still have value. Every word you spoke, every time you came back after being hurt, every tear you shed over them all served as evidence that they were worth loving, worth forgiving, worth holding on to. And unknowingly, you propped up the fragile ego they couldn't support alone. But when you stopped reacting, stopped performing with them, everything began to fall apart. They no longer had a mirror to look into, no one to manipulate, and that forced them to face the one thing they fear most themselves. A person who does not know how to love. A person who cannot face their own faults. A person who cannot bear their own imperfection. When you stopped reflecting their false greatness, they saw nothing. No spotlight, no applause, no co-star. Only the raw truth without your belief in the illusion they are. Nothing. They will never admit this. They won't say, "I'm afraid." Instead, they'll put on a new mask, the abandoned one. They'll say, "You're too cold. I didn't do anything wrong. You're the one who changed." Not because they believe it, but because they can't stand the fact that you saw who they really were, and still chose to walk away. For them, your realization is the fatal blow, not the loss of you, but the loss of their ability to control how they appear in your mind. And that throws them into a quiet collapse. They may still smile, still post pictures, still date someone new, but it's all a desperate attempt to resurrect the illusion, because deep down they're finally facing what they've avoided their entire life, emptiness. And that emptiness didn't come from you leaving. It came from you no longer believing, no longer reacting, no longer feeling hurt by them. You stopped giving them the emotional fuel they relied on, and so their ego begins to crack. They can't admit that you mattered, because admitting that would mean you had emotional power over them, and their entire life is a performance to deny that. So they act. They return to their favorite roles. The strong one who moved on. The innocent one who got hurt. The mature one while you're too emotional. All just masks, to hide from the truth that they've been seen. And you, through your silence, became the light that exposed their darkest truth. No need to expose them. No need to accuse. Just walking away calmly was enough to shake the entire web of lies they lived in. They don't need to be unmasked. They only need someone awake enough to stop being controlled. And that someone is you. You don't need revenge. You don't need an apology. You don't need them to understand. You only need the truth. And once you've seen it, no one can make you unsee it. They may find someone else, find another mirror, find another role to play. But they will never forget you, not because you were more special, but because you were the one who saw them clearly, and still chose to walk away. Version 5. You're not silent because you're weak. You're silent because you've grown. When you choose silence, you're not just walking away from a relationship. You're disarming an emotional bomb they use to keep you bound. And to a narcissist, that is a fatal blow. Don't be mistaken. They're not afraid of losing you. What they truly fear is losing their power over you. Your anger, your tears, your impulsive reactions. Those are their life force. As long as you react, you're still playing the game. As long as you're angry, Heartbroken, searching for answers, they know they still live in your mind. But when you are calm, they lose everything. And then, like an unseen tidal wave, the narcissist's rage rises. Not the childish kind of tantrum that comes from having a toy taken away, but a calculated, intentional kind of fury fermented in helplessness. Not because they're heartbroken over love lost, but because their ego is no longer being fed. You see in their mind you were never just a partner. You were a power source, a mirror that responded, an actor performing the emotional script they wrote. But now you're no longer that person, and to them that's not change, that's betrayal. They begin to retaliate, not to win your love back, but to reclaim the feeling that they still matter. They may lash out with cruel words, tear down things you once held sacred, or they may become suddenly sweet, trying to awaken nostalgic memories. They might even spread lies, twist the story, paint you as the villain in everyone else's eyes. Every move is deliberate, not to reconnect, but to provoke. If they can make you angry, they win. If you feel guilty, they win. If you begin to wonder, was I too harsh? They win. But what if you don't react? What if you remain calm, stay silent, keep living without needing their validation? Then they spiral in silence. With no way to pull you back into their control, they begin to crack. Internally. No one sees it. There's no dramatic breakdown. But behind the mask, the power facade starts to splinter. That rage with no outlet turns inward into paranoia, insecurity, and mental chaos. They begin to ask themselves, what are they doing? Did they really forget me? Why haven't they responded? Your silence drives them mad, not because they care, but because they can't control your response. And for someone who lives on control, that powerlessness is the ultimate punishment. Now they may shift tactics, from aggressor to victim, from judge to martyr. You'll hear them tell others, they were so cruel. I just wanted to love and be loved. They're cold and heartless. They may even cry, but not for love. Their tears are for the power that's slipping away. They want it back at any cost. And in their unraveling, revenge becomes the mission. You're no longer seen as a person, but as a force that stole their illusion. And they will try everything to destroy the peace you've reclaimed. They may use your children, weaponize the legal system, send others to poke at your deepest wounds. Every tactic designed for one purpose, to pull you back into emotional chaos. Because only when you react can they rebuild the emotional cage they once trapped you in. But this time, you see it all clearly. You recognize the pattern. You see the shift from, I love you, to, I'll destroy you for not needing me. And you choose not to participate. You don't retaliate. You don't explain. You don't descend into the mud they're trying to drag you into. You choose awareness, and that awareness is the very thing that truly breaks them. Because they cannot defeat someone who refuses to play. They cannot manipulate someone who no longer seeks understanding from someone incapable of love. The narcissist's rage is not a sign of strength. It is the sign of lost control. It doesn't come from rejected love, it comes from a shattered illusion. And the most painful part for them isn't that you left, it's that you're not looking back. You don't need to destroy a narcissist to win. You only need to walk away with clarity, with peace, and without any lingering hope that they will understand you. Because the truth is, they never will. Not because you weren't good enough, patient enough, or loving enough, but because they don't live in a world where love is a two-way connection. They live in a world where your emotions are tools, your reactions are fuel, and your existence only matters when it serves their illusion. And when you no longer serve that illusion, you cease to exist in their eyes. But ironically, that's exactly when you become your strongest. No longer a mirror reflecting their ego, but your own self, no longer needing validation, no longer needing explanations, no longer needing apologies, just ready to move forward. Your silence is not a sign of defeat. It is the pinnacle of freedom. No one saw you leave to the sound of applause. There was no audience, no tragic ending. Just you and the decision to stop being the background to a story that was never worth starring in. And that is the victory they never saw coming. If you've ever felt weak for loving someone who manipulated you, if you've ever blamed yourself for walking away quietly, if you've ever ached because you couldn't fix them, know this. You were never meant to heal those who don't want to be healed. You were born to live a real life, with real love, real emotion, real connection, and you will have that. But not by waiting for the wrong person to become the right one, by walking away permanently from the place where you had to trade your soul, just to be allowed to stay.